Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Evan Ruff, CEO and co-founder of Oxos Medical. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Evan. Well, we're delighted you can join us because we know you have, as we were recently just talking about, a new addition to your family. So again, big congratulations. When we think about healthcare, it's all about the community. And of course, it's all about your little family that's growing. So excited for you and your family. We're going to set the stage for the audience. And we always do this by kicking off and thinking about that big problem that Oxos Medical is looking to solve. So tell us all about it.
So Richard, Oxos was co-founded by myself and a hand surgeon, Dr. Greg Kolovich. Greg is a orthopedic hand surgeon down in Savannah, and through his practice, he found that really the existing radiographic devices that he was using, either for static X-ray or fluoroscopy, was really kind of slowing down his practice. And so he came up with the concept of this idea of a handheld X-ray machine that he could bring right to where he was working, kind of take a picture, take a video, put it down, and keep going. So he didn't have to worry about rolling in a giant C-arm or things like that. So we founded the company around that idea. We got our first FDA clearance in 2021 and built our first generation device. And through selling that, we sort of discovered that the problem that Greg was having wasn't really just isolated to hand surgery. It was pretty applicable across basically all of medicine, where X-ray is the most common, medical imaging modality. Some huge percentage of procedures and interactions really either start or end with an X-ray, and you still have the problem of these giant, high radiation, hard to use machines that require specialized people and lead-lined rooms, and it really impacts all of healthcare. And so from there we sort of continued on our journey building a better and newer machine. Just got that FDA cleared at the end of last year, and rolling out and commercializing that one, really with the idea of, bringing the X-ray out of these, individual radiography suites to the point of need. So bring it to the patient across basically all of healthcare.
No, and that's a wrap. We can stop there. Done. Now let's step back for a second, because let's set the scene again for the audience, because I think with this problem you're talking about, it's two things there. Accessibility, clearly, when you're talking about big machinery, clunky machinery, potentially expensive machinery, and how accessible is that? And the other point you made was how much this modality is used. I was looking at this WHO report, and I think, to be fair, it was dated about 2016, but they're talking nearly 4 billion X-rays getting taken globally. So a huge number. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about the problems that you're seeing faced by that lack of accessibility or affordability.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy about that number, that 4 billion images number, is, there's a solid 40-50% of the world that doesn't have access to radiographic imaging at all. So if anything, that number is really kind of held down by the machines are big, which makes them very expensive. And then there hasn't been a lot of new innovation, especially in the way that they're designed and the way that they're used around, how do you actually capture these images? You have to use a rad tech. The rad techs require training, and that kind of, creates bottlenecks and then accessibility bottlenecks. And so that's one of the big problems that we set out to solve. I joke with Greg, we're trying to make a device that's so easy, an orthopedic surgeon can use it.
As always, these problems are multi-complex. You're talking about, again, accessibility, the affordability, but clearly that sort of workforce aspect, which we hear again and again, in terms of having the people to run these machines. And the biggest point I think I take away from what you said there was the fact that we're just talking about a huge number already, but potentially a lot of people who aren't able to get access to this incredible technology that's so important for identifying broken bones and other issues internally.
Yeah, absolutely. The applications for X-ray, so wide, and it's used, obviously the intervention for traumatic injuries is obvious, right? But then you do screening for a lot of other diseases, especially with chest imaging, things like pneumothorax, pneumonia. You can use X-ray to diagnose tuberculosis, which is a big issue, especially in developing world. And so getting these things into as many people's hands as possible is really one of the things that we think can really move the needle on, global health outcomes. it's one thing to try to think about like, oh, this really cutting edge stuff like the personalized medicine and all that. That's going to make a huge difference, and I'm super excited and absolutely like, golden age of medicine. I think is we are absolutely in it. But then there's this other problem where just getting the absolute basics into the hands of as many people as possible can really start to raise the bar for all those folks as well. And so that's kind of one of the other things that we are really passionate about and really kind of focusing on, especially with our development roadmap and the newer device.
Well, Kyle, I know Evan was teasing us there a little bit with the solution, but ready to find out.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And Evan, it's super cool kind of hearing you talk about, the current challenges in the market today and how you've got these big complex systems taking up this real estate. It's really a bottleneck to being able to provide, fast, quick turnaround images, x-rays for patients. And, we always bring this up, Richard, but when we had Jeff DeLillo, the CEO of North America for Philips on the show, they were really talking about their report, their annual report the Global Health Index that they produce every year. And it was just so cool because they are super focused on developing technologies that are easier to use. So newer doctors and physicians coming into the industry, it's really important that you make these devices and technology simple and easy to use for them. And then on top of it, it's really important that it improves speed, efficacy, all of that. And it really sounds like you're doing this now on the X-ray front. So yeah, let's definitely talk a little bit more about your product. Help us understand really what it looks like. Because I remember when we were talking years ago, I remember the look of your product years ago when I first discovered Oxos. And I think you actually had a different company name by then. So talk about coming such a long way. But I remember having a big clunky cable. Now I look on your website and you see this beautiful, sleek design, handheld device, really small, compact, no cable, battery operated product. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about the product and how it works and operates and how these hospitals are leveraging it.
Right. So the new device today is kind of in a category of its own. So it can do static imaging, it can do dynamic digital radiography or DDR. So that's moving X-ray. And then it can also do fluoroscopy, all in a handheld device. And one of the things that was really important to us is, from that usability standpoint, today, you're just there's no really good way to make sure that the anatomy you're trying to image and your X-ray detector is lined up with your X-ray source so that you can just make sure that you're nailing what you've got. And so our device has a screen, a 3-inch screen on it that's right in front of the user, and it shows exactly what is going to be captured, the anatomy, it shows where the X-ray detector is, and it shows where the emission is. So you essentially just line up these boxes, pull the trigger, and you've got a clinically relevant image. And with some of the new AR technology that we're deploying, it can actually help guide you through an exam. So for instance, if you want to do, a wrist study, so 3 views of the wrist, you're going to need an AP, a lateral, and an oblique. And so what we can do is in the UI, you select that you're doing a wrist exam, and the guide on the screen will actually guide you through proper positioning. So it'll make sure you've got a true AP, it'll make sure you've got a true lateral, make sure you got a true oblique, so that when those images go to the physician, either the radiologist or they go to the X-ray, or if the PA is taking it and it goes to a tech, whatever, you don't have this additional X-ray exposure to the patient, and you don't have to go back and do reshoots. That's another huge thing. Sure. And so our idea really is, pick this thing up, line it up on the screen, and pull the trigger. It's just like using your iPhone camera. There's really nothing that's very complex about it. And so that technology is really unique to Oxos, and one of those things that helps us get it out of just the radiology suite as far forward as possible. And so you mentioned where is it being used today? So one of the big things that we're seeing, one of our our signature client is Cleveland Clinic. And what they're doing is they're taking Oxos MC2 devices and they're bringing them out into their community hospitals. So at the main Cleveland Clinic, you've got interventional radiography suites, you've got all the legacy equipment, and they use Oxos devices there. But the thing that they're really excited about is taking the Oxos device out to, get as close into the community as possible so that they can do a lot of those preliminary exams there, so that when people do need surgery, they can show up to the main hospital and they already have their films there, it's already been determined that they need additional intervention, and they can really streamline their workloads in both places. And so that is really, I think, from a big hospital system where Oxos can really make a difference.
Yeah, no, it's really cool because I mean, what you've described it sounds like you're making that whole user experience so simple that even someone like me and Richard, I mean, I feel like we could use this device no problem. And
10 minutes. 10 minutes, we can have you taking x-rays of anything.
I mean, come on, that's amazing. And I love too how you're trying to, the example with the Mayo Clinic, right? Also, when I think about, the ambulatory market and space, right? You think about sports and on the sidelines, and I know you've done some, I know your marketing team's done some stints with other sports teams, but it makes a ton of sense, I mean, being able to take those x-rays right away, early and often, and save so much time and money probably on the healthcare system, I would imagine that's going to make a huge impact, especially rural areas. And then to your point, other places in parts of the world where they don't have access to technology like this.
Yeah, I mean, the ambulatory scenario is an interesting one too, because those guys, are deploying Oxos devices in their exam pods and just moving them room to room. And what they can do is really cut down on the cycle time for the patient. So the most frustrating thing in some of these places is you go in, you see the doc, you sit down, you see a PA, you wait, the doctor comes, then they're like, yep, we really do need to get some x-rays, for instance, like of your shoulder or whatever. You have to go to an entire other part of the facility to then go get your images. Then you get to go back to the exam rooms, wait again for him to show up. Then they look at the images, and then they, determine what the next steps are in your care. Where with our machine, roll it into the room, take the images of the anatomy, review it right there with your physician, and then you're ready to go. So they can see more patients faster. They don't have that big, bottleneck of the X-ray suite, and so you can kind of get, a better experience for your patients and then for the providers as well. They like it because they can get through patients faster, and in some cases even do like some small procedures in the exam room itself. We've seen that in, foot and ankle guys. Some of the podiatrists can do that. Even some of the upper extremity guys, like, making sure that they've got the needles placed properly when they're doing guided injections, things like that. So you can do them right then and there and make sure that, you're giving that patient the best service as quickly as possible, and then getting the best, clinical result as well.
It's absolutely amazing what you've been able to achieve, Evan. I mean, tell us a little bit more about the technical aspects for all us nerds out there who want to know more about how this works, and like some of the technical concerns I guess you could have around. I'm thinking like when I was at the dentist recently, normally you would get like a big lead suit or something on when you're getting this done. Has that changed at all, in terms of that user experience? And again, like, how does this all work?
Yeah. So, I kind of tell people, so the device that Kyle's talking about earlier, the first version of the device, that was really, can we make a handheld X-ray work for, dynamic and static imaging? And we got that one done, and that was great. You have, of course, the issue of, you're holding, in our case, 80,000 volts in your hand, which is somewhat nerve-wracking, from an engineering standpoint. And then the other, I think, underrated issue with the live imaging is, the X-rays generate some heat when they're shooting out in the focal spot. So in this one little area. So the device itself doesn't get hot, like you don't hold it hot, but you can melt, your X-ray tube, and that's a problem. So the question is how to get the heat out of there. And so we've done a lot of work on, managing the thermal management, generating, a very fast and sharp rise time and fall time, so you get really, really crisp images. And then, of course, all of the communication between the emitter and the detector, so that you know that you're in the right spot. So like machine, for instance, like you can't miss. So it shows you all of the, the emission and the detector, but like if you happen to have it off, off axis and pull the trigger, like it won't fire. There's no real danger to the patient or the operator in that environment. Like it just simply won't emit any X-ray. So those safety systems are, I think, one of the really unique things about Oxos, because that's one of the things where I'm sure we're the only handheld live imaging device out there. And I think a lot of that has to do with the safety systems that we've got to make sure that you're not just spraying X-ray all over the place. And so we have the positioning system is just like an entire sensor array that makes sure that not only does it, align up when you start, but that as the exam goes and everything sort of drifts and stuff, it corrects so that you always are, within sub-millimeter accuracy of, the emission in the detector. And then, there's all sorts of things about, you got a battery in there. How do you process the images? Once you've got the images, where do you put them? You have to make sure that you've got connection into, generally into the facility's PACS server and their modality worklist server. And then, we kind of built our own cloud system on top of that sort of runs along that for those facilities that don't have them. So you can just essentially get the device, plug it in, and go.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about the image quality and the connection. And that's a great point you're making. Like, so it could be wireless, but equally it could be a physical connection to a machine. Are we talking USB? What type of connections or cables are you using there?
No, it's entirely wireless. And then the device, like to charge it, you just use a USB charger. That was like at some point I had 3 different cables for my Apple devices, and I'm like, this is insane. Like, so I was like, it's got to be USB. So which turns out to be a giant pain. I get why people don't use USB-C sometimes. So we did all that. And then it can wirelessly connect to like the local network in the facility and connect to the PACS servers and DICOM servers and things like that. And then depending on the facility, you can connect to our cloud platform to do all your image management that way. One of the issues is like, especially when we see like more rural urgent cares or places like that, they don't really have the radiographic infrastructure already in place. And so it's one of those things that like, yeah, we'd like to have X-ray, but like, it's like, okay, so the device cost X, but then I got to build a lead-lined room. Okay, that's another 125,000. And then I got to get a PACS server. Okay, that's another 10 grand. And then I got to get somebody to put them all together. And then I got to get somebody to like run it and make sure that, I'm getting all of my, archival done correctly so that if I get CMS audits, I can, meet all that burden. And so we handle all that kind of stuff for those customers that want it. Cleveland Clinic, they've already kind of got it. They don't need it, but a lot of our customers do.
It's a pretty comprehensive package you're bringing to the table here. You've got the solution, but clearly you've got all the suite that goes with that. And I'm kind of thinking in the back of my mind, I'm sure there's some sort of AI potential here. Imaging is so hot right now, and it's never too far away from those 2 letters AI.
Yep.
It's a good question.
That's definitely
yeah.
part of our, And we see it, Oxos's role. So we do a lot of machine learning and AI stuff in our device. Like, so that's how our automatic exposure control works. Like, we know how thick the anatomy is. We use all of our sensors, and that's kind of how it chooses. But our role, the way that we see it is we'll invest in our own AI to make sure that radiation is reduced, it's easier to use, or you can get a better X-ray image for a given amount of radiation. And then we will partner with whoever wants it to kind of go that last mile through our platform to get to the point of care. So we've worked with a number of companies that have FDA cleared sort of CAD-E algorithms out there, but you kind of have an issue, they have like a sales issue in that there's no real good channel. Like, if I roll into a radiologist's office and be like, hey, radiologist, person that's like done this for 30 years, you should pay me because I've got software that does your job better than you can do it. Like, that's a tough sell. Like, I mean, even if it's true, you're like, oh, okay, great. I should definitely so our kind of, approach is we can use our device, integrate their AI in, and it runs on the device the way that we have deployed it. So you don't have to worry about the Wi-Fi being bad, because the first time a doc hits like the fracture detection thing and it doesn't work, that's the last time they use it, like, right? Because like, the Wi-Fi signal was bad. So it runs on the device, does it, generates the report, shows it to the user, and then we can send it and file it away in PACS or whatever, structured dose reporting or wherever you need to go, we can go ahead and do that. And so 2 of them, the really exciting things that I think are going to be like the most impactful the soonest, I think, are pediatric bone age AI algorithms, because that's a pain. Like, that's a real pain point for docs. They do not want to do it. There is absolutely no conflict of interest there where you're like, do you want to go through, file through a 300-page thing to see like the closest, bone age? No. So pediatric bone age is a big one. And I think DEXA reporting for community health is another big one. So if I go see my orthopedic surgeon or I go see my general practitioner, and I'm more of an elderly person, especially elderly women, of course, are recommended to get bone density studies. If we can get an AI running on our device to do that, so you don't have to actually go to a DEXA scanner, I think you'll be able to get much better management, much more proactive management of osteoporotic conditions, through that sort of a deployment. And, your competition there is a DEXA scanner, and that's like a whole room. You need another technician. They're kind of fallen out of favor in terms of kind of the rollout we're seeing. I don't know if that's just our experience, but like they seem to be harder to find. And I think that the gap in getting those DEXA scans done are probably going to end up being a problem, especially for the pickleball set,
Yeah, yeah.
the pickleball stuff is, so that's just kind of the other thing. So the AI stuff, like, is it going to replace a radiologist? I mean, that seems like a pretty kind of far off from our perspective.
Well, I think that, we're really doing a great job here at kind of covering a lot of, the technology, the current markets today. And, you've really alluded to several opportunities for Oxo to pursue. So let's talk about that go-to-market strategy. So here you are with your new FDA-approved technology and device. Where are you guys going first? What part of the market are you trying to penetrate first?
Yeah, so we've got, nationwide distribution. When we started, we work with distributors. When we started, we were working with a lot of the capital equipment guys that are selling existing X-ray systems. And we didn't really have a lot of luck that way. Their call point is radiology, and the advantages of our device aren't really necessarily prevalent to the radiologist. They are doing a lot more interpretation than they are doing actual capture, and it just didn't resonate that way. So we kind of shifted gears, and now our distributors are the guys that are distributing, screws, implants, those sorts of devices. And so they are talking to your orthopedic surgeons every day. They're talking to your podiatrists. You're talking to all those guys. And that has been way, way better, because getting that physician champion, especially if you're going into a system, they have much more touch points in that area than the other guys do. And so we found that that's been absolutely the best way. For our near-term commercialization, so that's sort of this launch to, let's say, Q3, we are working through, this huge pipeline that we've got of primarily ASCs, orthopedics, and urgent care. That's kind of our sweet spot right now. Those guys are familiar with X-ray. They understand the benefit of our device versus the competitors. And it's a very, straightforward sales process for a lot of those places, especially in the ASC market, where, you have sort of the physicians are really the guys that are making the decisions about the capital equipment that they use. And so that's a much faster sales cycle for us. We've got a lot of things that are maybe sort of towards the end of this year, especially on the government side, that we're excited about. We've worked with the VA before for several of our first generation devices, and that, we've got all of our procedures done with the VA. We need to get there's some compliance things that we've got to go through and get that done, and then we think VA will be another big one, especially towards that Q3, Q4 once the fifth certification is all done.
Yeah, you've got this like super new though technology, right? And it's like something that has never existed before. It's something that doctors have never even thought about and never had to really think about. So when you're going to an orthopedic doctor, a podiatrist, and you're introducing this technology to them, how does it, what are, I guess, the challenges that they have to overcome as a doctor to figure out, okay, well, geez, this is a whole new technology. This is going to change the whole workflow of how we see and treat our patients. It's going to change other parts of our hospital too. It seems like it's starts to be a much larger decision. How do you overcome, maybe challenges of introducing something brand new to your customers?
Well, so what I'll say is, I don't think we have to do much education, honestly. I've had previous startups where you had to educate the customer like from zero, and that's super difficult. And that startup ended up not being very successful because you spend so much of your sales time getting to like just from 0 to 1, right? Not even just like this is why you need a product like this, and then let me tell you about your product. Like, that's a really hard, road. Mm-hmm. With us, like, it's X-ray. Like, everybody's familiar with X-ray. We never go into a place where people are like, hey, you should check out this new technology called X-ray. That really doesn't happen. And I will say, a lot of guys like don't believe the machine is going to be adequate from an image quality standpoint, and then they do a demo, and they take that first X-ray and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then they take the DDR image, the dynamic digital radiography, and they're like, oh man, that's awesome. And so we get this really big customer, like, that delight that the consumer goods guys talk about, like that consumer delight. So
Mhm.
that happens very quickly. And then you have the workflow question, right? And so in some cases, especially in the ASCs, the benefit of having the device in clinic can kind of it can flip the economics from the doctor's perspective of their clinic sort of upside down. So it gives them the opportunity to do small procedures in their clinic where otherwise they probably wouldn't do it.
Oh,
You
interesting.
know, and so things like injections and things in motion studies and things like that, you're not going to go take OR time to go do an injection. Like that's preposterous, right? So
Mm.
those don't really happen. They just kind of wing it. And so with our device, in clinic, you can certainly do those procedures right there in the exam room, and that does give them the ability to kind of upskill and upcode some things in clinic, and that's a very powerful thing. And then when you talk about the surgical stuff and you talk about like the larger practice-wide workflow things, that is a larger conversation, obviously. But by then, they've probably already bought one or two of these things, and so for instance, my co-founder, he's in a 26 doctor practice. So like that, that was a much larger issue, and he's a co-founder of the company, so that was much larger than getting it in there. But the benefits accrue so quickly to one doc, and then he shows the next guy, and then it kind of just snowballs from there.
Yeah, and it
And it's
sounds like surgical, sorry, Richard, but it sounds like surgical kind of implies like if you can offer those procedures, I mean, there's obviously more reimbursement too on certain surgical procedures, right? So,
Absolutely.
there's
100%.
those advantages then obviously to that orthopedic doctor or podiatrist.
Yeah, I mean, in-office visit, it's not paying the bills, right? I
Right.
mean, and so especially in the specialty world. So the economics of the device really make a lot more sense in that case when you talk about being able to do more procedures, do faster procedures, turn the OR suites over fast enough.
Yep.
Because like a lot of these guys, especially the larger practices, I mean, they're capacity constrained. There is no shortage of orthopedic intervention, especially with aging population and all this other stuff here in America. That is going to be an issue. There's a capacity issue. Shortage of doctors plus a lot more aging population means that wait times are going to go up, and you need to work a lot smarter, I think, and I think we can be part of that. I'm not saying that we're going to solve that problem, but we can certainly help that on the imaging side.
So it sounds like the pipeline's pretty hot, and understandably, when you're bringing this much value to the table, you mentioned short term, like longer term, and I was looking on your website, you've got this potential application around the sports medicine piece. How are you thinking about that and positioning there?
One of our first customers was the NFL team. And so the head coach of this organization was like, look, I'm paying this offensive lineman $60,000 a snap, and my x-ray machine is a 25-minute walk. So it's like, I need to get this guy. Is he hurt or not? Like, is it broken? Okay, if it's not broken, rub some dirt on it and get back out there. So, sports are another big thing. You have to make sure you're getting these guys the absolute best care. And for us, that means the absolute best imaging as quickly as possible. And so the device has to work. It has to be, very, very precise imaging. And, you can't blast a ton of radiation, especially like on a sideline or a sports field, or, even in the tunnel or things like that. You got to really be very cognizant about the amount of radiation you're using. So we talk about the scatter cloud. So when you shoot an X-ray, you can think of it like almost like water. So you shoot the water, some of it gets absorbed through and creates the imaging, but some of it bounces off the anatomy, and that's what we call X-ray scatter. Now, it's not like a lot of it of radiation, but it's still radiation. And so our device, we like to be below a 3-foot radius of scatter, where some of the existing devices, especially the larger devices, it can be like 20 feet of scatter. So when you talk about the medical tent, that's certainly, as long as you do it in the tent, you're not going to really get anybody else have any exposure. And so we've seen a lot of success there. I think ambulance is another big one, right? So take the images before or during the transport, so that when they hit the front door of the ER, you already know what you're going to do. So like basically pull the triage up. You always talk about the golden hour stuff. Like if you can move up that chain, that would be a big one. And so, all these sort of new places that you can bring this technology, I think can really start, making it super, super useful in a lot of new places that, you wouldn't maybe have thought about in other scenarios.
Yeah, totally. And the other one, I guess, is humanitarian crisis. I think like with all this that's going on in the world and, the challenges people are facing, I feel like this is the sort of technology where you could go into a disaster zone and actually you want to do a quick assessment of somebody who's in a very difficult situation, you could do that. So again, I think
right.
like from that accessibility piece, there's just huge potential for technology like this.
Absolutely. And you wouldn't need to necessarily have like a rad tech, like especially in a crisis situation. Like I'm telling you, an EMT, a fire person, like, I mean, just a lightly trained user can get you to the information you need to make those sorts of decisions for sure. We're talking to people about using it. I mean, so my co-founder, Greg, his Dr. Kolovich, he's a big medical mission guy, so he's taken it all over the world. He's taken it to Central America. We do some stuff through USAID and the Luke Foundation in South Africa, Southern Africa, and so all over Eswatini and places like that, where you go to like really, really low resourced areas, and you can see how, number one, it's amazing the job that they do today, like the way that they organize things and the way they get through the patients, because you're going to a village, you got 200 people ready for medical care, you got 8 hours, like, okay, let's rock through this. And like the way that everything is triaged is amazing. And then you bring a device like that and you can really do a lot of good really quickly, and is something that, is great and that we're passionate about. So things like that is just, it's going to be a really, really great thing for a lot of people.
I don't know about you, but if anyone listening right now wasn't pumped before they joined this conversation, I'm feeling so pumped just listening to all the potential here. And just like, I think again, that we have this word about the podcast being all about impact. And clearly this is what this product is all about. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's awesome stuff. I gotta say, I mean, like, just X-ray in general, all of us can relate. Like literally almost everyone has had an X-ray. So, for this, technology, I think it kind of resonates with everyone. What about the next kind of 12 to 18 months? You got any big events coming up, any kind of milestones on the horizon, anything you guys are working towards over there?
So, our next 18 months, is of course getting the launch, getting production set up. We'll be at all the trade shows and things like that. AOS, of course, we're going to be at all the hand, foot, cool. AF, all that. So come check us out there. Website oxos.com. That's another great place to go get a demo. We'll have a distributor there. Come. We're working with a lot of device manufacturers on doing their labs as well. And so if you're a physician out there and you're going to a lab, just check and see if you're using our devices for radiographic imaging needs there, or if you're setting up a lab, let us know. We'd be happy to help. And then, our kind of next step this year is we're expanding markets. So we just got clearance for Canada. So we're starting to ramp up Canada. And we are currently at Arab Health right now, looking at MENA region, and we're starting to go get all of our applications in for that area as well. And so I think following that will be New Zealand and Australia, and then kind of getting all of those, Oxos distributors set up for all of those places as well. So that's kind of the next, 12, 18 months, I would say, for us.
But just a little bit going on,
Yeah, a little bit going on. I mean, and we've got, we've got great support folks, and our distributors have been great, and our clinical champions have been great, and it's the response has been just really, really incredible. And I'm very proud of our team and getting through this. That our most recent FDA application was a bit of a bear, but we finally got over that hump and are just really excited to start getting this in the hands of the customers, seeing what their feedback is, improving it that way, and then finding out what other applications there are. I mean, we get wild ones. Falconry was one that was like, oh, falconry. Okay.
Wow, that's an alternative.
You got, okay, tell me more. Yeah, so, and then try to, obviously, like I think we kind of already touched on, there's a lot of applications, and we just need to kind of make sure we don't get a little too wild. But it's always fun to see the incoming, info at oxos.com gets wild questions.
Oh, yeah. Wow. So tell us more, like, I guess that thinking about all those things coming up, like, are you looking for new team members? Or are you looking for specific partners? How can people help in any way along that journey?
Yeah. So I think that, we are, one of the things Greg and I always talk about is like, we want to keep we're really happy with MC2. We think it's an absolute, leap forward in terms of the technology, but we want to make sure that we keep, moving forward in terms of, can we make it lighter? Can we add more anatomies? Can we do, new features around things like, point of care things, more durability, things like that. And so, we will continue to expand our team. That's a, go to Oxos Careers and find that, always looking for engineering, biomechanical engineering, and things like that. Physicists are always very welcome as well here to try to figure out how to, squeeze more X-ray out of a given amount of energy. And then, we've got our distribution partners, all these new countries, especially, finding good partners that can really help us get the right relationships stood up and kind of get devices out the doors is always helpful. So, would love to hear about any of that as well. If you're doing research studies or stuff like that, and you need radiographic imaging support, email us about that as well. We also love supporting all the research stuff as well. That was how Kyle and I met. We were doing research support in Yale, and he helped us with some stuff. So
amazing. And just to recap, so it was info@oxosmedical.com, is that right?
Just go to the website and fire it in there, or info@oxos.com.
Oxos.com. We got it. Amazing, man. Well, yeah, this has been incredible. This is like, you've got growing family again, you've got a growing business, and you're there primed to make impact. So super excited. I'm delighted you could join us today.
What is this? Yeah. This is the 30th day. It's been a big Q1.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it keeps going in that same direction, because again, there's so much potential with this. So thank you for coming on and sharing the story.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me, and it was great. Really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Awesome. Well, hey, everybody, another big thank you to Evan Ruff, CEO and co-founder of Oxos Medical. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.